Unless you're tremendously lucky, at some point your garden's going to be brutalized by pests or disease. From deer to aphids to blight, there's no shortage of factors that will lay waste to even the best tended of gardens, and my garden's no exception. About a month after planting out my spring and summer garden, I started to notice some troubling signs in many of my plants, some symptoms that started to worry me. One of the first troubling signs I noticed was a silvering of some of my winter squash leaves that's affecting this plant here. This is a telltale sign of a pest called the silverleaf whitefly. The saliva of the whitefly nymphs is actually slightly toxic, and the plant's reaction to the toxic saliva results in the silvering of the leaves, as we see here. Another telltale sign of whitefly activity is the curling of the leaves, as we see here. And they're way too small to be picked up by my camera, less than 1 millimeter in length, but a close examination of the undersides of these leaves did reveal some whitefly nymphs at work. This is a real problem. As I know from experience, a whitefly infestation can absolutely devastate squash plants and reduce yields significantly. My second round butternut squash planting from last year is a prime example of how devastating a whitefly infestation can be to squash plants. This should drive home the utter importance of taking care of a whitefly infestation in the early phases before it's too late. Another little fun fact about whiteflies: like aphids, they emit a substance called honeydew. It's a sticky, sweet substance that coats the leaves of plants. This honeydew will then attract ants. These ants will then begin farming the aphids or whiteflies and protect them from the predators that typically eat such pests. I've said it before, and I'll say it again: nature is amazing and also a huge pain in my ass. I also recently began noticing some damage in the bottoms of my tomato leaves, as seen here. At first, I was concerned that this was some kind of bacterial or fungal issue, but it was really too widespread for that to be the case. I found this particular damage on almost every single plant in my garden. Closer observation over the next couple of days revealed that the damage was indeed due to whitefly. As you can see here, this leaf is coated with adult whiteflies and what appear to also be aphids, so I'm getting a double whammy here. I put way too much time and effort into these plants so far to just sit back and allow pests to decimate them, so I needed to come up with a plan for dealing with this in the early phases before it became a real problem. Some sources recommend simply blasting the bottoms of leaves with a jet of water to dislodge whitefly nymphs and eggs, but I'm always very hesitant to get my tomato leaves wet for fear of inviting fungal issues. So I decided to order in a bottle of insecticidal soap concentrate. This is a product that's okay for organic gardening use, as indicated by the OMRI on the label here. It kills not by toxicity, but by disrupting the cellular membranes of soft-bodied insects, such as aphids and whiteflies. It's apparently less effective on hard-shell pests, such as various beetles and stink bugs. The label said to dilute this at a rate of 2.5 ounces of product to 1 gallon of water. With a spray bottle full of appropriately diluted product, I began to treat the undersides of my squash leaves. While insecticidal soap is pretty benign as far as bug killers go, some precautions should be taken. For one thing, it should only be used in the evening after pollinator activity has largely ceased for the day. This can be a threat to bees. Similarly, it's best used on plants that have not yet begun to blossom, again, to reduce the risk of harming pollinators. Also, applying this in the heat of the day in direct sunshine, it can result in leaf damage. Some leaf burning can occur. This product provides a contact kill only. It doesn't leave any kind of residual. So once it dries, it's done. Therefore, it may be necessary to provide follow-up treatments for a bad infestation. And as you can see, this is somewhat of a tedious and meticulous process. Of course, whiteflies love to cling to the bottoms of leaves, making everything a little more difficult. That's why it's imperative to catch these kinds of infestations early on and take care of them when the plant is small. Doing this on a full-size squash plant with, 10 to 30 foot spread on the vines really wouldn't be doable. Treating my tomatoes is going to be a little more involved than treating my small, immature squash plants. So these non-determinate slicing tomatoes here, I've pruned these all down to one productive stem apiece. This leaves plenty of airspace between each branch, so getting up underneath the leaves to coat where the whiteflies tend to live isn't going to be that tall of an order for these particular plants. On the other hand, my determinate bush-style sauce tomatoes here, my Rio Grandes, are going to be kind of a tall order to treat. The foliage is a lot denser just because you don't typically prune determinate tomatoes as aggressively as you would a indeterminate. So it's going to be a lot harder to get up underneath and get the undersides of the leaves. I'm honestly harboring no illusions that I'm going to be able to coat every square millimeter of the underside of every single leaf. I'm really just doing my best to knock the populations of the whitefly down enough to where it's not going to be a real detriment to the plant. So I loaded up my 2-gallon sprayer, nice functional cheap sprayer I got at Harbor Freight, if I remember correctly. Kind of an indispensable tool for a backyard gardener, to be honest. And I'm doing my best to angle the sprayer upward underneath the leaves here, doing everything I can to try and coat as much as possible. Like I said, it's kind of hard given how dense the foliage is, but hopefully, like I said, this measure will be enough to take these suckers down a bit. And it wasn't really showing up on film, but I was kicking up a fair number of adult whiteflies as I sprayed. It's not really feasible for me to repeatedly spray almost 70 of my tomato plants throughout the season, so I'm going to companion plant to hopefully prevent the whiteflies from reestablishing populations after treatment. So I'm going to be loading every bed up with some basil, nasturtium, and especially French marigold. All of these plants are said to repel whitefly, but French marigolds, there's actually some researched evidence suggesting that they emit a substance called limonene, which is particularly effective at repelling whitefly. I'm linking a study in a pinned comment for this video in case anybody's interested in reading through that for the science behind it. As a bonus, it turns out French marigolds are an incredibly fast germinating, quick growing plant. I seeded these pots here about 2 days before filming, and they're already poking through the surface. I don't know that I have experience with too many plants that grow quite this fast, but they'll be ready to go in the gardens before we know it here. Hopefully my control measures are enough to give my plants time to yield a decent harvest. For now though, I'm just in wait and see mode. If anyone watching this has fought pests or disease in the garden, I'd love to hear about your fight in the comments. Until next time, let's hope it all doesn't die.